Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this particular video, let's talk about document specific chunking. In the previous video, we already have seen semantic chunking. I hope everything related to it was clear to you all. Now let's have a look at a new chunking strategy which is very popular. So without further delay, let's start. First, we'll have a look at the official definition of document specific chunking. And the definition says that document specific chunking is a methodology of splitting the text based on the unique structure and content of the specific document. Now, we might have data of a particular format. You might have observed the JSON format. There are curly brackets and it contains key value pairs. This is one type of format. Then we have MD files, which are nothing but Markdown files. Markdown files contains some particular format of text. There are headers, there are subheaders, there are some images which are formatted with some particular syntax. Also, there are certain links which are again formatted. One best example where we can apply this document specific chunking is nothing but code. Every single coding language has their own syntax. Let's take Python syntax. Let's take an example of Python code. Python code contains functions, classes, there might be some constructors, there might be some variables defined, there might be some libraries imported. For every single functionality, there is some syntax defined. So that is again one type of document which has a specific format. So when we have such types of documents, there we can use this particular chunking strategy, which will split the text based on the unique structure and content. So it makes the task easy. This particular approach customizes the chunking process to suit the organization format and context of the document, such as chapters in a book, sections in an article, or headings in a report. Obviously, here we cannot use the recursive character text splitting or normal character text splitting. Also, if we use semantic chunking here, it might not work correctly. So in this case, this document specific chunking suits the best. So I hope you might have got an overview of what exactly document specific chunking is. Now, let's have a look at the working of document specific chunking. Let's see that. So first we analyze the document to identify the structural markers like headings. Let's take an example of empty files. Empty file contains some headers. Headers are defined by hash. If there is one single hash, it is parent header. If there are two hashes followed by text, it is counted as subheading of the parent header. Similarly, if the number of hashes increases, it is counted as child headings. So for MD files, we analyze the document to identify the structural markers. So here in this case, we have the structural markers as headings, that is hashes. Once we analyze it, we simply use these markers to define where chunks should start and end. So basically, we'll make this as splitters. Based on the splitters, we'll split the text. We'll simply separate the text into chunks. This is how we can create the chunk and we can define where it should start and where it should end. Then we can simply extract the text between these markers to form chunks. And once chunks are created, we ensure that each chunk maintains the context provided by its section. Now for doing such tasks, there are already a lot of inbuilt libraries present. Also, we can simply define our custom function to do this particular task. We can simply customize the functionality as per our need. So I hope the working is clear. Now let's simply have a look at the practical implementation of how this document specific chunking works. We'll see different examples of different document formats so that it will be clear to you what and when to use. Now let's see how we can implement document specific chunking. Now let's say we have this particular Python code. We use this particular code for creating semantic chunks. Now what we'll do is we'll simply create chunks of this particular code. Now, here in this particular case, we cannot use recursive character text splitting, or semantic chunking because by using that, it won't create correct chunks where the context will be preserved. Here, this particular thing is a Python code and Python has its own syntax. Now, we'll simply use LangChain library to create chunks out of this particular text. First, let's simply store this particular code in a variable called as py. Let's simply store it in the form of a doc string. Let's execute this. Now in LangChain, we have a library called as PythonCode TextSplitter. This particular library is inbuilt and it will automatically create chunks of Python code. So we'll simply import that particular module. So from LangChain dot text splitter, we'll simply import the Python code text splitter. Now let's run this. Now let's simply call this particular module Python code text splitter, and in this we'll simply define some parameters. So let's define the chunk size. Let's keep it as 100 and then define the chunk overlap. For now, I'm going to keep the chunk overlap as 0. Now these are the parameters that I have defined, and let's store this particular object in a variable called as PySplit. Let's execute this and we have our text splitter ready. Now we'll simply call the function named as create documents from this particular object that we have defined. So PySplit dot create documents. Now, why we use this particular function? Because here we didn't have created the documents of it. We simply have a plain text. We don't have it in a format of document object. That is why we have used this particular create documents function. It will automatically convert each and every chunk in a document object. And if the text document contains any metadata, it will automatically store the metadata of it also. So we'll call this create documents function, and inside this we'll simply pass the variable py in which we have our code. Now we'll not simply pass this particular variable as it is, we'll pass it in the form of a list. Now I already have told you the reason why we pass it in the form of list. If you want to know the reason, then you can simply have a look at the earlier videos where I have explained you fixed size chunking as well as recursive chunking. And let's simply store this particular thing in a variable called as chunks. Let's execute this and our chunks will be ready. So let's see what exactly is present inside this variable chunks. Let's execute this and you can see we have our chunks ready. You can see every single chunk is now in the form of document object. Since we had no metadata in the plain text, we are not getting over here. You can see how it has created the chunks for our Python code. You can see all the libraries. You can see these libraries are separately stored in chunks. If you look at the function where we have defined the split para to sentences function, it has stored the entire function in a single document, or I would say in a single chunk. All the comments are separately stored. You can see even the conditions, the if condition, the else conditions are separately stored. But here I can see that where we have defined this particular list comprehension, I think it doesn't rectify it correctly because you can see this particular list comprehension, it should continue till this particular in sentences. You can see here we have this entire thing in one single list comprehension. It should store this entire thing in one single chunk, but it has not done that correctly. So for now, it's fine. LangChain might update this in future so that the list comprehension will be stored in a single chunk. Rest, I feel that every single chunk is properly created. So you can see how useful this particular Python code text splitter is. This is a type of chunking strategy for document specific chunking where we have a Python code. So I hope this particular type of chunking strategy for this specific format is clear to you all. Now let's have a look at creating chunks out of the Markdown. Do you want to check out this attractive funny memes? Then what are you waiting for? These are just a glimpse of the memes that I've created on my Instagram page. You can find the link to my Instagram handle in the description box. Please visit the link and do watch all these interesting funny memes. These are not just memes. These memes and reels contains technical information. Here I try to relate memes with the technological concepts. So please do appreciate that by watching all those. And if you love it, please hit the follow button. So you can see here, we have this particular first header, which is the parent header. When we see the preview of what exactly is the output of this particular file, then we have this image. Here you can see the image has got displayed. Now here this is a fake URL that I have generated. So that is why the image is not getting displayed over here. But if you write any genuine URL over here, it will simply display the image of it in the preview format. Then we have this normal text. Next we have this double hash header. You can see its size is smaller than the parent header, that is the one with single hash. Next we have the double hash header again. Next we have this particular image. After that we have this triple hash header. Here you can see the triple hash header size is lesser than the double hash header. Similarly, the text goes on. I hope you might have got an idea of what exactly MD files are and how we can use it. Now I have simply uploaded this particular blog.md file here in the collab notebook. We'll load this file and we'll create chunks out of it. Now for doing so, we'll again use LangChain text splitter. And specifically here we are going to use Markdown header text splitter. So let's import that from LangChain dot text splitters, import Markdown header text splitter. Now next we'll load the file and we'll read the content out of it and store it in a variable. So with open, inside this we'll simply write the name of the file, that is blog.md. We'll open it in read mode, we'll store it as file, and we'll simply read that particular file and we'll store the content out of it in a variable named as markdown text. Now we'll simply create an object of this particular module, markdown header text splitter. So let's do that. We'll define the splitter variable and we'll simply call the module markdown header text splitter. Inside this, we'll have to pass on the headers to split on. Now, headers to split on is nothing but a list. Now, this list contains tuples. Each tuple contains the header sign, that is, if it is 1 hash, if it is 2 hash, and the second part of the tuple contains the name of that particular header. Say header 1, header 2. So let's define this particular headers to split on list. So as I said, it is a list and it contains tuples. Let's define the first tuple as hash for the header 1. Let's define the name of it as header 1. Similarly, we can define another tuple of double hash and we can simply write header 2. For now, I'll define only two tuples for two hashes, 1 hash and 2 hash. So what it will do is it will create chunks based on these splitters, double hash and single hash. Wherever it addresses any of these patterns, it will separate the text and it will form chunks out of it. So now let's pass on this variable as headers to split on and then simply define one more parameter, strip underscore headers, and we'll set it as false. So far we have defined these two parameters inside our markdown header text splitter, and let me correct the spelling. Yeah, so our object will now be ready. So let's execute this particular thing. So far we have defined our content in the variable markdown text and we also have set this particular splitter. Now it's time to create chunks out of it. So let's define the variable chunks. Inside this, we'll simply call this particular splitter object dot split text. Now inside this, we'll simply pass on the markdown text, the variable in which we have defined the content of the MD file. Now let's execute this particular cell and our chunks will be ready. Now just to show the output better, I'll be defining a loop here. For I, comma, chunk in enumerate the variable chunks. What this enumerate does, it will simply return two things. First, it will return the index of that particular element in the list that we have passed on here. And next is the content that we have defined in that particular list. And then inside this for loop, we'll simply print chunks in a particular format. So let's execute this. So here you can see we have got our chunks. Now let's make it better. Now over here you can see we have got the page content equal to. Why? Because every single chunk contains the page content. So we just want to access the page content parameter out of it. So let's define page content and let's execute this again. So now over here you can see our chunks has got created. This is our chunk 1. This particular chunk contains our first header, that is my travel block. Next we have our chunk 2. This contains the second chunk, which has a double hash header. Then we have chunk 3. Here you can see double hash header was addressed, and that is why these chunks were separated. Now here you can see in this particular chunk itself, we have one more header, but this time it has a 3 hash. So it has been a part of this Paris header only. Why? Because in this particular object, we have defined the headers to split on as 1 hash and 2 hash only. If you would have defined 3 hashes also, it would have created a new chunk for it, for this. Next, we have the chunk 4 with 2 hashes again, and then chunk 5 with 2 hashes again. So I hope context is clear to you all, how it splits the text based on the specific format. So because of this, better chunks are created, and if better chunks are created, obviously your RAG flow will be better and you will get more accurate results. So I hope the document specific chunking strategy implementation is clear to you all. We have seen how we can create chunks out of a specific formatted code of a particular syntax, as well as we also have seen how we can create chunks of Markdown text, which has a particular syntax. Now that we have seen the implementation of document-specific chunking with multiple examples, let's summarize it into when to use this type of chunking strategy. So when dealing with documents that have a clear and distinct structure, the documents which have a particular format and the syntax remains universal. In that particular case, we can simply use this type of chunking strategy. When preserving the organizational format of the document is important. Yes, there might be cases where the document formats matters a lot. In that case, we can simply use this chunking strategy for tasks that requires contextually relevant chunks tailored to specific document types. Now, if you look at real world use cases, there we might have multiple types of data. And for sure, you will come across with such data where specific format has to be maintained to preserve the context and meaning. So there we can use this type of document specific chunking strategy. I hope this is clear. Now let's have a look at why to use this particular chunking strategy. So we can use it for custom fit. It tailors the chunking process to unique structure of the document. As I already told you that here in this particular type of document specific chunking, you can simply create your customized functionalities so that as per the data that you have, you can create your custom chunks. So here we have the accessibility to tailor the chunking process. Next, to preserve the context. It maintains the logical flow and the context of each section. As we already have seen in the MD files, each and every header was preserved as separate chunks. Next, for relevance purpose, it ensures that every single chunks are relevant and meaningful based on the document's organization. So for all such tasks, we simply use document-specific chunking. I recommend you to explore this more and solve multiple use cases based on this chunking strategy. It will be very helpful to you. If you guys seek any help regarding this in future, then you can straight away put it in the comment section. I'll be very much happy to solve it. Regarding this particular video, if you have any doubts, then you can post that also. So that's all about this particular chunking strategy. For more such videos, do like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Also hit the bell icon and don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Please join me on Telegram. And wait, if you love memes, then you can follow me on Instagram. There you will find multiple tech related memes, which will not only make you laugh, it will also make you understand multiple complex concepts in an easy way. Thank you for watching. Have a good day ahead.